Hello, you wonderful people. So for today's video, I'm going to talk about Trails, specifically the Kiseki/Trails video game series. If you're unfamiliar what it is a JRPG series. It's kind of a sub-series because the overarching series is The Legend of Heroes, and then a sub-series amongst those series of games is the Kiseki, aka Trails games, like Trails in the Sky, Trails of or from Zero, Azure, Trails of Cold Steel, Koro no Kiseki being the next set of games. Either way, so on and so forth. If you're coming across this video, most likely you are someone who is a fan of the Trails games, or maybe you're someone that's interested in the Trails game. And based on the title you're reading, you're probably I posit the question that some people might be asking, and that is generally, do you need to play all those games? I actually did a video a while back talking about the same thing with the Kingdom Hearts games. This is a little different, but it's still in that same ballpark. Giving you the short answer, no, you don't need to play all those games to be able to enjoy, like, be able to just kind of pick those up. The longer answer is, it depends on you. Now, kind of breaking that down, kind of using Kingdom Hearts, for example. People might not know this, so really quickly, Kingdom Hearts, I recommend playing all the games, or at least even if you don't have the systems to play every game. I mean, they've made it a lot easier because of the story so far. Well, they've all been kind of remastered and, you know, put on the PS3 and then eventually the PS4. So everything kind of works out on that front. So it's a little easier. And I think they're also on like Xbox now too. I think, and I could be mistaken, but I do believe. Plus, there's also like the Switch stuff too, so it's a little easier to kind of play all of the Kingdom Hearts games now if you're interested. But the thing is, none of those, it's not a thing of none of those, like, oh, there's games that are insignificant. They're all significant. They all play towards the overarching storyline. They're not like, oh, these are side games. It's like, they're treated, some might get and have the perception of being side games. They're not. They're kind of all tentative towards the same overarching story. They're all pieces to the same puzzle. Kiseki is almost in that interesting territory because the way Falcom designed those games, the games are meant to be, they are designed in a way where, yes, you could pick up any of those games at the beginning of their arcs and not have to worry about the previous arc. So if you want to, you don't have to play the Laburo games, the Sky games, to enjoy the Crossbow games. You don't need to play the Crossbow games to enjoy the Cold Steel games. You don't need to play the Cold Steel games to enjoy what is now the Calvert arc that started with Koro no Kiseki, and they're already kind of working on the second one. You don't need them, but it helps. It's kind of the whole point. Because like I said, Falcom designed these games where you can kind of jump in on any arc at any point in time. I started with the Cold Steel games. It seems like, generally speaking, most people's first introduction to the Trails game. Not everyone, but most people. But and they're designed in a way where, yes, there is lore that, because to anyone that doesn't know, all these games take place in the same universe. It's not like Final Fantasy where some take place in the same universe, but others are just kind of like, it's not like, oh, 7 and 8 and 9. Like, that's not how the Trails games are. They're all in, they're separate stories, but they're all in the same universe. And not even separate stories, because they're all built upon each other, because you'll hear about past events from previous games and stuff, like previous arcs. Basically, this all takes place on a continent known as Zemuria, and each one of these games, the different arcs, like the Sky games, all 3 Sky games take place in a country known as Laburo. Then you have the Trails of Azure and, well, Zero and Azure, which take place in a country called Crossbow. All of the Cold Steel games take place in a country called Erebonia, and the next set of games, the Koro no Kiseki games, are going to take place in Calvert. So they're all countries in the same universe. So once again, and they're all like, the events, you'll, like I said, hear events from previous stuff. Like using Cold Steel, for example, you will hear about events that took place in the Laburo games. Kind of spoilerish, but not really. There's like a 1.5-year time difference between the 3rd Sky game and then like the events of the first Cold Steel game. There's like a 1.5-year time difference between them. And kind of parallel to the Cold Steel game are the 2 Crossbow games. They basically coincide with the first 2 Cold Steel games. They're happening storyline wise at the same time. Events in one are affecting the other. In fact, events bleed over kind of all around, and that's kind of the beauty of this universe, that these, and that's the thing of it. That's why I think, that's where I kind of get into the, you should play all of them. Will you, I mean, obviously it's asking a lot, because there are currently 11 games, technically speaking. The 11th game, 10 and 11 haven't come out yet, but there's 3 Sky games, 3 Liberal games, 2 Crossbow games, 4 Cold Steel games, so that's 9 games all on its own. And then there's also the Hajimari, which kind of acts as an epilogue to the Cold Steel games and the Crossbow games as well, but that hasn't come out outside of Japan yet. And then there's also the Kuro no Kiseki games, which haven't come out in the US either. So it's asking a lot, but like I said, if you wanted to start with the Cold Steel game, start with the first Cold Steel, you can, and you won't. Yes, there's lore, but the games do a really good job of explaining things that you might have missed out on. But the cool thing about it is, like, it allows certain conversations for you to get the full story of it. Like, characters or storylines will be referenced in the Cold Steel games that it didn't mean as much to me when I first played them through. But now, having gone back and know the story of the Liberal games and the Crossbow games, it heightens the Cold Steel games that much more. I know that, I mean, the same thing could apply to Kuro no Kiseki. Like, maybe you didn't even touch the Arabonia games, the Cold Steel games, but when you get to the Calvert games, say like Kuro no Kiseki, whatever that ends up being when they, eventually like localize that, you could start with that and completely not have the Cold Steel games. Even if I didn't have the knowledge of the Liberal or the Crossbow games, if I just played all 4 Cold Steel games like I did, I would still get something out of going into the next arc, because there's at least one character that you get severely familiar with, without spoiling it to anyone that's avoided things. There's at least one character that's pretty prominent, majorly prominent, in the Cold Steel games that I know makes some appearance in Kuro no Kiseki. There's other characters because of Cold Steel 4 that allow you to, that you might know tentatively, that you're like, oh, I see this particular character might be in Kuro no Kiseki as well. And that's also the interesting thing, this is kind of entering spoiler territory, but there are certain games in that universe, especially with the Crossbow games and the Cold Steel games, that they bleed over major stuff from the other games in the sense of not only storylines, but characters. So, giving a great example would be like, Estelle and Joshua are the main protagonists of the Sky games. They play decent roles in the first Crossbow game, Trails to Zero, or Trails from Zero. So they're pretty majorly in that, and there's another character tied to them that makes an appearance, and she has her own role to play in the Zero, and obviously those all kind of play and lead into the events of Azure and so on and so forth, and that has major implications and effects on the Cold Steel games. In fact, 1 and 2 could definitely stand on their own, and 3 as well. But then when you get to Cold Steel 4, spoilers a little bit, culminates everything. It's pulling in stuff from the Sky games. It's pulling in stuff from Zero and Azure. Like, it's kind of that game is like a culmination of not only the Arabonia arc, but the Crossbow arc and the Liberal arc, kind of giving you like conclusions to stories from way back when. So I'm saying this as someone who has only ever played the Cold Steel games, but I have watched someone play the Liberal games and the Crossbow games just because I love this universe so much. And once again, having that knowledge, it makes some conversation, it adds weight to certain conversation, it gives you certain insight, these references, these universal references where a character might mention a name and it's like, oh, that name will mean nothing to you if you haven't played the previous games. Once again, you don't need to, but it adds an extra layer of fun. Like, having gone through the Cold Steel games again, which I'm currently like nearing the end of 4. Yes, I've kind of taken some breaks here and there, and I haven't recorded anything in a while. I haven't edited anything, but I'm doing my spoiler discussion videos about those. Now having the Liberal games and the Crossbow games knowledge, it informs so much more of the Cold Steel storyline, because I'm like, oh, I get that. Oh, I didn't recognize this line at all, but now having the context of the other 2 arcs, I know who they're referencing and what that could be in reference to, so on and so forth. So it adds so much more to it. But yes, like I said, it's a complicated question, because you can start at any point in time. Like, if you want to start with the Cold Steel games, you could. Would you be missing out on stuff? Yes. And so maybe you don't have access to every game, because I don't have a PC, like gaming PC, so I can't play the Sky games or the Crossbow games. At least the Crossbow games are going to come to the PS4 next year, so I will be able to. So It's a very layered question. That's why I say it kind of comes down to you, how much you want to kind of put into it. Once again, at this point, you would be playing, if you live outside of Japan, you'd basically be, there are a total of 9 games. Technically, there's like another game that's in the middle of that. I just don't know how much it's connected to all of this or whether it's kind of its own thing. So it could technically be 10, but let's just focus on the 9 that are definitive, are part of the Trails Kiseki universe, all in the same universe. So you'd be playing, that'd be asking someone to play 9 games. But if you are interested in taking a deep dive, I recommend playing all of them, or at least playing what you can and just watching videos of the others, and when the opportunity arises, play those games for yourself. There's also the conversation of, do you even have to play them in order? And it's like, once again, no, but it will help, because if you don't play them in order and if you ever decide to go back, it will spoil some storylines, because you're like, right, I know what the end result is, but there are still some things that are never filled in completely. I mean, once you get to Cold Steel 4, it's going to end up spoiling a lot of stuff from the previous 2 arcs, so you kind of get in that territory. But to some extent, even though things kind of get spoiled for you, you still don't have the full context of what they mean, and there's still a lot of plot twists and developments that you won't see coming because of it. And you start noticing some interesting through lines that Falcom plants in their games as kind of like oh, see, there's a certain way we do our storytelling, and there's a certain thing we do it kind of again, but we kind of add a little extra interesting twist to it, and the reveals are kind of done a little differently. Once again, it's just like, there are characters that do carry over into the future games and stuff like that, so it would help if possible. I would recommend, it's asking someone to do a lot of homework. It's like the Kingdom Hearts game, but I think, like, if you are someone who is like me and has only initially played the Cold Steel games, and you're like, oh, I don't know if I should go back and play the others, I would recommend you do, because there's still a lot of wonderful story and characters that should be, you should know. Plus, there's a lot of context that even if you played all 4 Cold Steel games, there's still context you will be missing, and there's so much beautiful, interesting lore that the Cold Steel games don't even touch on. I recommend you kind of read into it if you are really curious, but that's just kind of my perspective on things. Like I said, it just comes down to what you want. If you want to just say like, hey, I played the Cold Steel games, I have no interest in going back, hey, I respect your decision, and you could just kind of go with this series going forward. If you're like, honestly, I have no interest in the Cold Steel games, I'll just start with the Koro no Kiseki games when they come out, cool beans too. I'm sure those games are specifically designed where you can just jump into the next arc, no issues, especially if you haven't played the previous. It would just help inform a lot of stuff in this universe if you have the knowledge of the previous games. That's just kind of all. Obviously, these are just some of my thoughts. I feel like, generally speaking, most people who are fans of the Kiseki/Trails game probably have a similar perspective of, yeah, it just probably comes down to you. It helps to play all of them, but you don't have to. It probably would just, it would benefit you too, but you don't have to. So, but obviously, like I said, these are just my thoughts. I'd love to get to know yours in the comments down below. Are you someone who's played, like, how many of these Trails games have you played? And do you agree with my sentiment? Do you disagree? Like, are you someone who, hey, say like you've only played the Cold Steel games, like I said, like me, but you have no intention of going back to the others and you're fine with that? Or have you actually gone back? Maybe you've only seen or played the Libero games, but not the Crossbow games. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.